Hola, and welcome to Vive Nutrition Radio, the first ever Spanglish podcast where you will hear interviews with the top minds in nutrition, performance, fitness, and health in both English and Spanish. Here is your host, expert registered dietitian, Andres Ayesta, on a mission to help you take your nutrition to the next level. Hope you're ready for this. Let's dive right in.
Welcome back, my friends, to Vive Nutrition Radio. If this is your first time, hello and welcome to your maybe first episode today. If you know who I am Andres Ayesta, registered dietitian and nutrition coach, owner and founder of Vive Nutrition and host of Vive Nutrition Radio. So super delighted to have your smiling face here today listening. Very excited to have you. Today's conversation is with my guest. His name is Chris Tuttle. And Chris is an amazing guy, and he's one of a kind. I'm going to tell you that. The reason for it is because Chris is an IFPBB pro, which is an International Federation of Professional Bodybuilding. And to become a pro, you have to do quite some things, and he truly has. But the most interesting thing about Chris is the fact that he is also a registered dietitian. I think he is probably the only dietitian that I know that is as massive as far as like muscle building as he is. He has a true passion for bodybuilding, but honestly, he helps most of his clients to achieve great nutrition habits, to achieve nutrition goals. And I loved his methods, and I loved the content that he puts out on his Instagram and his social media, him and his wife, Alexia. And both of them really help a lot of people improve their lifestyle. And also, of course, he helps a lot of people prep for bodybuilding shows and physique competition. He has an amazing record for client wins and placements and pro cards. And it was really, really cool to hear his story. Believe it or not, Chris started as a motocross athlete, which was not something I was expecting. But today's conversation revolved around the true reality of a nutrition process and a nutrition journey, and the stuff that people don't want to hear. Example, you're not going to gain 6 pounds of muscle in 3 months. It's not realistic. It's not going to happen. And Chris was there to tell you exactly how long it truly takes to do that. And one of the biggest things that resonated with me the most is when he works with his clients, he will tell them and say the truth, and he will speak transparent to them and said, if you're doing this type of training, it's not going to be conducive to building the muscle that you're trying to achieve. So we had to speak the truth. And I highly admire him for that as a dietitian, because a lot of times in nutrition coaching, some people or dietitians, coaches, nutritionists, or whatever may be the case, will tell you what you want to hear and not what you need to hear. And Chris does not do that. He will tell you transparently what you need to hear. And I think that makes him one of a kind as well. So today's conversation we talked about the process of a nutrition journey, the differences that exist between a prep for a bodybuilder versus somebody that is just trying to get jacked as a lifestyle, and some of like the pros and cons and the benefits and the process to really get there. We also talk about his methods, the supplements that he recommends, which a lot of them align with the stuff that I also recommend. And honestly, he's a very well-versed and research-based dietitian who teaches people the science behind nutrition and how to accomplish specific results. He does have a background of hypoglycemia when he was younger. And actually, this is one of the reasons why he started his entire journey in nutrition to become and on the path to become a dietitian. So, but I'll let him speak about his story and also some of like the knowledge that he provided on today's episode. Before I let you go and get on with today's podcast, I want to make sure that you remember that I have an actual Facebook group and Facebook community that keeps growing by the day where I provide, if you think this podcast is valuable, you would love the stuff that we put out there. I go in there live every single day to teach you specific topics on nutrition, whether it's macro tracking, whether it's ketogenic diets, intermittent fasting, and very applicable concepts in nutrition that I think you may benefit from. And if you're an action taker and would like to be part of this community, I'm going to give you an opportunity to join if you click on the link on the show notes. This is only by invite, but if you tell me on the questions asked that you provide with your name, and also that you listen to this on the podcast episode, I'm going to immediately accept you into this group. It's only open for people that are either private clients or people that I invite that I know are going to be valuable resources or additions to the community. So if you want to be a part of this and you're listening to this, do not miss this opportunity. I would love to see your name there. Make sure you let me know you listen to this, or you're actually requesting to join because you listen to this on our podcast. I think that's all I have for you today. I would let you get on with today's conversation with Chris Tuttle, and I'll see you guys next week. Enjoy. What's going on, guys? Thank you so much for tuning back in VV Nutrition Radio. As I mentioned in the intro before this, today we had the pleasure to have Chris Tuttle. Hopefully I said that right. And Chris is one of a kind. I was just telling him right before we started this recording, because Chris is a bodybuilder, IFPBB pro, and also are a registered dietitian. You don't really then tend to see this two things mixed together a lot of times in this world. And we're going to talk about all kinds of different things here today. So Chris, man, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for your time here today.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you having me on. This is going to be good.
Great. So I think we could probably get started and just kind of break the ice with, I usually start this podcast with your story, man. I like to hear people's stories. So tell me what it all started, your passion for nutrition. And I know that you kind of battle with some things at the, early ages and stages of your life, and, some stuff with blood sugar. So why don't you kind of tell me the background, where did it all start with Chris Tuttle and how it got you to a point where you're in today?
All right, cool. So my obsession with nutrition, I wouldn't call it obsession, I guess some people would call it that, actually started very young, around age 6 or 7. At a young age, obviously every kid likes eating candy, likes eating junk food. But I noticed at a young age, when I ate certain candies, I felt weird. Like I get headaches and I'd get dizzy. And, obviously, sometimes as a kid, you don't want to eat lunch. And then your mom's like, you have to eat. I'm like, I don't want to eat. And then I'd get dizzy and pass out. So as time went on, my father was a physician. My dad's like, well, he sounds like he's not eating enough food, or he's getting going hypoglycemic. So my dad did a glucose tolerance test and, gave me the orange juice and the sugar and checked my blood sugar. And my blood sugar never went up. It just went down.
Really?
So my dad's like, wow, he has got a very high insulin output. So at a young age, my dad's like, you need to eat regular meals, Chris. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So at a young age, I knew that certain things make me feel a certain way, and I didn't like the way I felt. So traditionally growing up in high school, elementary, they might give us snacks at 10 o'clock, and it's crackers or whatever. And I would bonk out an hour and a half after. I would get dizzy and have to sit down or feel sick to my stomach. So my mom would pack me a half a sandwich, or something more solid, something more balanced. So I tend at a young age to gravitate more towards, when I was younger, I would call it real food. So my friends for lunch would just eat Nutter Butters and peanut butter and fluff, or they would just eat candy and they would leave their lunch. And I would go there with money and I would give them lunch money and they would give me their lunch.
That's a great trade.
Right. And they would take the money and go buy whatever at the a la carte line. So I always gravitated towards that. And I didn't really put 2 and 2 together. I just tend to move more towards that food at a young age because of how it made me feel. So that started the liking of it. Obviously, as you know, building habits of nutrition creates repetition. So more repetitively, I was eating eggs for breakfast. More repetitively, I was eating a sandwich for a snack, and then solid food for lunch, and then like another half sandwich or something solid after school, instead of being like combos for lunch, pretzels, regular soda. Like I wouldn't do that because friends would, and they'd look at me like, let's ride our bike to the gas station. I'll get some Rolos and a Sprite. I'm like, how about we go to Subway? And they're like, no, I don't want Subway. I'm like, I'm going to go to Subway. I'll ride my bike to Subway. And that started really young. And that's kind of like my general gravitation towards nutrition. But I never thought about wanting to learn about it at that point ever. Until I started racing motocross. I always rode dirt bikes when I was 5. I started racing when I was 7. Started racing when I was 9, actually. And after getting my butt kicked the first year, my parents hired a trainer, a motocross trainer. And he looked at my diet and he goes, this diet's crap. And then he was all about protein, fats, complex carbs, kind of like the real basic foundation of food, you know, nuts, olive oils, almost like similar to the Mediterranean diet, so to speak, but like with a little more leeway, obviously being a kid. So he cleaned up my diet and had me weight train for motocross, and my body changed fast. I'm like, wow, this is kind of interesting. I didn't realize that weight training caused that type of response, even though I wasn't bodybuilding. It was more like your CrossFit style training. And then combined with nutrition, my mom would cook me like the hamburgers and grilled chicken, and I'd make grilled chicken sandwiches and chicken and potato real young at like 10, 11. And my body changed really fast. And obviously at a young age, building habitual eating habits with those types of foods obviously made it much easier to stay with it. And, you know, as I am now. So that's how nutrition really started to like take off. I'm like, wow, this nutrition's having a more profound effect than it did before. I can see the difference in the high performance in my training on the track, my running. And I'm like, and my body was changing fast. I'm like, this is cool. So then I started picking up books and magazines and bodybuilding and lifting and learning more about nutrition, basic stuff, all the crap you hear in magazines, which is not necessarily right, but I wanted to learn more about it. So I raced motocross, always trained with weights. My body responded really well, looking like a bodybuilder, even though I wasn't trying to be. And I always wanted to bodybuild, but my trainer's like, dude, you can't bodybuild in motocross. That's like trying to become, it's like, it's two different things. You got to be light, fast, agile, repetitious for those long motos. So you never let me bodybuild or get bigger. So after I finished racing motocross, I wanted to bodybuild right away. And I actually turned professional status racing motocross when I was 21. And then I had to grow up and not race anymore, not break bones all the time. So I started to go to school at that point for exercise science. I started to lift weights for bodybuilding and really kind of get into nutrition, weighing and measuring my food, learning more about it, how it makes me feel, carb cycling, all this radical stuff that everybody at the time thought was false and weird and crazy. And then I started to realize that my love was not for exercise science and training, but it was for nutrition. So then I switched my major to nutrition and wanted to become more versed in nutrition, because I thought that had a much faster, more profound effect on the body and how I felt and how I looked than actual training. I mean, I was training for years and I had somewhat of a change. And the second I changed my nutrition, it's like night and day difference, you know? So then I became, during this whole period of time, I was still competing in like bodybuilding and going to schools, be a dietitian, and finished the school, did the master's, did the internship, passed my test, turned pro in 2013 as an IFPBB pro, winning nationals light heavyweight. And then from there, I worked at a hospital as a clinical dietitian, as a floater, different floors, ICU, oncology, GI unit, the whole nine. And I liked it. It was great. I love nutrition. It was fun at the hospital. The only downfall is, at the hospital, it's like the average stay is 3 days. So you don't really get to see your work done. And you get a lot of frequent flyers in the hospital in and out who are non-compliant. Which is, and during that whole period of time, since freshman in college being nutrition, I was helping people lose weight, for like $50. Help me do a show. You did well at your show. Can you help me do mine? Sure. And then their friends like, well, hey, I don't want to do a show, but can you help me get shredded for my wedding or shredded for a vacation? I'm like, okay, sure. Give me $50. And then over all that period of time from 2005 to 2009, I was building clientele at the time, but I really just saw it as extra cash on the side,
Yeah.
And then once I became a dietitian, got a job, now that kind of gives you more the stamp of approval,
Yep.
And more people learned that I moved back home and I was around and started to hire me more. And then eventually I was like, geez, I can't keep up with all these people in the side business and all these, and then working at the hospital. So I cut back at the hospital. And then within 6 months, I was working like 60 hours a week. And I'm like, geez, I think I actually might be able to quit the hospital. Then I quit the hospital. And then I started doing nutrition online full time and helping people at the gym with nutrition, making individualized nutrition plans. And then as time went on, I couldn't do it myself. I couldn't keep up with billing. I couldn't keep up with, then my wife quit her job and she stays home. And now we both do it full time, 12 hours a day, Monday through Saturday. And now I have clients all over the United States and other countries. I help people compete. But majority of my clientele is actually general weight loss, nutrition, transformation, diabetes management. I have a lot of GI-related nutrition clients because I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis 2014. Actually, symptoms started 2013. I truly got diagnosed in 2015. And then, in the bodybuilding world, since people knew who I was, they heard I have digestive issues. And a lot of people in bodybuilding have digestive issues because most bodybuilders have no idea what they're doing nutrition-wise. They just know the basics of like carbs, macros. They don't understand micronutrients. They don't understand digestion. They don't understand overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, and the GI issues that can go along with repetition of large quantities of food. And then I have a lot of clientele who do that now. And then, so here I am, work at home with my wife, and we help people, and it's fantastic. It's sometimes it's funny. It's like, when you're younger and you get a job, you look at the clock being like, man, 3 more hours till I'm out of here. And like now my wife and I look at the clock, are like, are we going to be done by 9 p.m.? Done by 9 p.m. How much more work do you have? I got an hour. I'm like, okay, well, I'll try to get done in an hour. It's like, yourself and you like what you do and you love it. It's like, you just don't stop working,
Yeah, man, that's a very powerful story, dude. And I relate a lot to it because you and we both do, we do this full time. We sit in front of a computer, all day long, 12-hour days, dealing with clients, working with them, helping them in some ways or shapes or forms. But I think the part of it that really resonated to me the most about your trajectory and everything is literally how you started lifestyle changing. Like you hear all the stories from different RDs or nutrition coaches or professionals in the field and how they started, and a lot of times it's actually a lot later on. It's because of an issue that they had, or eating disorders, or sometimes just a passion that they developed over time. But for you, this is something that kind of started early on as an athlete, and so somebody that also had issues with health, and that was actually pretty powerful. And it was really cool interesting to know that you actually were in motocross at the beginning. I did actually had to work with a motocross athlete the other day, and sometimes people think well, you're just on a bike, you don't have to do anything physical, so why would you need to focus on nutrition, right? But a lot of times people don't understand the importance of it because they don't really see it as they only search for nutrition whenever they have a vested interest, like you said, like a wedding or this or that. They don't really look at it as something as a habitual thing, as literally brushing your teeth and making decisions on nutrition. And that's what I teach my clients, doesn't really become that. So I think that's really, really powerful, some of the stuff that you share, because now really that's what you kind of teach people do, and you don't hear it very often. Now, I guess to kind of pivot and to try to pick an area that would, because I literally could go into many different tangents here to talk about some of the stuff that you mentioned. But I guess the bigger thing as a bodybuilder, and somebody that also helps people achieve their goals and things like that. How do you what is the main difference, so we can kind of start talking and separating things out here from clients that are involved heavily into bodybuilding and your regular weight loss clients? A lot of times it's is it really, it's a very very different animals. I just kind of put it this way. So what do you see like are, if you would maybe like create the characteristics of a nutrition program, or like, like, or the needs for each individual type of person? Because a lot of times like people don't understand this, and then, well, I want to eat like a prep client, or like I want to eat like somebody that's going to compete on a bodybuilding show, but honestly all I want to do is like I want to get shredded. So how did you define like that kind of difference, and how did you create the characteristics for each individual type of client when you're working with them?
Yeah, so generally like people have very inaccurate expectations when it comes to gaining muscle and losing fat. I'm sure you run into this. Like,
yep.
Like you're not gaining 10 pounds of muscle in a month. You're not gaining 10 pounds of muscle in 6 months. You're gaining maybe 3 to 5 pounds of muscle of solid weight in 12 months. And if you're genetically superior, maybe more, but that might only happen for the first 2 years of you lifting. And then it greatly slows. So like, as you know, there's always coaches and trainers that will tell you anything you want to hear to make a buck. So that's a big obstacle with a lot of non-competitive bodybuilders to get them to understand, where they hire you for 12 weeks to put on weight or lean muscle. They expect like 2 pounds of muscle per week. Doesn't work that way. But as far as like when you're comparing the two diets to two people, one who wants to compete and become very competitive and one that doesn't but want to look the part, it's more or less they get a little more leeway in what they're able to do and what not to do. But I will tell them like, listen, like obviously being super strict is going to get you results faster, but it's also probably going to create poor eating relationship. It's probably going to create obsession. You might cause strain in your relationship. So those are things that come with it. So I usually allow them and make them understand that, and make them understand that they are allowed leeway and they can match their macros if they need to, if they go to eat out, and still kind of be a weekend warrior and still get results. But as far as differentiation between like macro breakdown, it's really, as you know, it's more just the individual person. Some people do better, obviously, with a little lower carbs, a little higher fat. Some people do better with the higher carbs, lower fat. But as you know, too, it's like the best diet is the diet they're going to follow. So sometimes I get a lot of people who have a preconceived notion of what they want to do. And even though that it's not exactly correct, I will work with it because I know they'll follow it. If they come to me and they go, I hate carbs, I'm carb sensitive, can't do it, won't do it, and I totally disagree with them, I won't necessarily say that. I'll be, okay, that's no problem. We'll start with very low carb, and then we'll see how your body handles it, and then we'll progress over time. And then after 6 weeks, I got them eating carbs, and they're like, wow, this is great. If I gave them the amount of carbs that I thought they should be eating, they're probably going to be like, oh, this is not for me. I can't do it. You know what I mean? So in my experience with nutrition, helping people with all walks, it's like a huge 80% psychological aspect of being able to follow a plan, implement a plan, stay with it, be sustainable, and, not to overthink, or, people are always looking at what other people are doing. They need to pay attention more to what they're doing. But it's really hard to really define that in a clear,
No, but it's really interesting because it's essentially kind of what I was like, wanting to get to. It's basically understanding that there's levels of strictness that you can follow in one versus the other. But it's like you're saying, like, for somebody that is like trying to achieve a specific result, like in prepping, for bodybuilding show or something like that, that level of, how strict you are with your nutrition to have like a faster result, or just something that is just more like going to be on, like, I guess on a timeline, obviously it's going to be a much higher compared to somebody that is, it's just doing it for, like I said, like you said, like, to look the part. Now, one of the things that resonated a lot that you just mentioned was the realism of muscle, like, muscle building and putting on muscle mass, because I deal with this with clients all the time. And then they go through stages in which like they're trying to drop body fat. And I wanted to take on your take on this. Like whenever somebody like comes to you and this is like, well, I want to like, this is a typical thing. Every single day you probably hear it, like I want to gain muscle mass, but I don't want to gain body fat, or I want to do both. And, how can I do this? Like, and I think people listening in, they're going to be like, yeah, I want that. Like he's going to give us like the answer. So what is like your reaction to this? Like, and what is like that narrative and conversation that you have your clients that come to you and say, I want to do both. I want to like get jacked and shredded, but then I want to put on muscle mass at the same time, especially the dudes, that come in with that expectation.
I'm very blunt with my clients. Like I used to kind of, like beat on the bush, like, oh no, you could do that. It doesn't work. I'll flat out tell them right away. I'm like, yeah, I want to have $1 million and I don't want to work for them. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, it's not possible. I get situations all the time where they'll do CrossFit and they're like, I'm 185 now at 15% body fat. I want to be 200 pounds in 6 months at 4% body fat. I'm like, and you're 40 years old, you have 2 kids, you do CrossFit and you play hockey 3 times a week. And he goes, yeah. I'm like, that's 110% impossible. And he goes, really? I'm like, yeah. 1, you're training in a way that's not conducive to hypertrophy. 2, you're playing hockey, which is not conducive to hypertrophy. 3, you're 40 years old. So your testosterone is probably a little bit lower than it was in your 20s. You've been lifting for a long time. So your body's has more muscle mass than it genetically normally has. You have 2 kids, so it's not like you can dedicate your life to nutrition and training. And 3, you can't, that's like putting on 20 pounds of muscle in 6 months. But I tell them, like, you can't gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. And I'm going to explain this. You need a caloric surplus to put on your lean tissue. You need a caloric deficit to lose body fat. So in certain circumstances, you can lose body fat and gain a little muscle. But the rate of fat loss and the rate of muscle gain is going to be very small. Not to mention, if somebody's sedentary and they haven't weight trained at all, and you give them a weight training program and a good diet, they will gain muscle and lose fat at the same time for probably a period of maybe 2 to 4 months. And obviously there's a huge genetic factor in that. Some people have really good genetics. And I explain to people, it's like cars. A Volkswagen Beetle, I hate to say this, is never going to be a Ferrari. It's just not going to happen. People will go to the gym. They see the Ferrari walking around. They want to go up to him. Hey man, what do you do for triceps? Your triceps are huge. And they're like, oh, I don't train triceps at all. Or I just started training last week. Genetics reign supreme. So if we take genetics off the table, in general, it's always best to focus on one and then the other. You can't focus on, I get this too. Well, what if we do a bulk for 8 weeks and we cut for 8 weeks, we bulk for 8 weeks and cut for 8 weeks? I'm like, that's like saving all your money for 8 weeks and spending it all for 8 weeks, saving your money for 8 weeks and spending it. Why don't you bulk for 10 months, cut for 2 or 3 months, reassess your rate of gain, what you've achieved, your body fat, and make a new goal. There has to be segments. Too many people will be like, well, I everything's going good size-wise, but I got a pool party in a month I want to tighten up for. I'm like, well, you're going to waste time now. You should focus on one goal or the other. And that's the hardest thing to get people through, because you have every article and magazine written by people who have no idea what they're talking about that are in the spotlight to try to sell something, and people will attach and try to find out what they want to hear, and they go, that's what I want to do, and what they want to do is impossible. So when they create these expectations unrealistic and they don't follow through, they quit because their expectations are unrealistic. So I tell them right away, I'm like, the best thing honestly to do is to focus on fat loss first, get to a body fat that you are happy with, and then focus on lean mass. And you will put on some body fat. It's inevitable. You have to. It's like there's no way around it. You don't have to bulk up and get fat where you're 40 pounds above your stage weight or 40 pounds above where you were to start, maybe 10 to 15, not 40. You don't need to eat cheeseburgers and French fries because that's only going to turn to fat. So it's probably a conversation that I have with 99% of men who contact me, because they all want to do that exact same thing.
And how did you set, that expectation? Because I do believe also in being blunt as a nutrition coach and dietitian and telling their clients what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. But how do you set kind of like that expectations and paint the picture of the future so they kind of they stay compliant and because I'm sure like you'll deal with a lot of client frustrations. Like they get it, they heard it the first time when you told them the first, but then they still, when you do client check-ins and stuff like that, they're still telling tell you like, I'm just not seeing progress. I'm not seeing progress. Because I know like one of the areas I read about you too was like you also focus a lot on the mental side of things and like, you know, the mindset, you know, part of it, which I think is everything in nutrition coaching and it's everything. So how do you kind of set the expectations and follow through with it to ensure that your clients get it? Like they know this is not a 1, 2, or like 8-week program, which I hate those fucking things. Like, you know, like, oh, like, you know, 8 weeks to like, you know, muscle mass or, you know, shit like that. And I'm like, you know, that's just not going to work. How do you, how do you get them to like follow through with it and just like literally to stick into the process and understanding that this is something that they're committed to in the long term?
Usually in the initial conversation, I will be blunt with them. Like, you know, sometimes when you talk to somebody right away, you're like, you almost already know they're going to fail before they started. I will tell them that right off the bat. I go, listen, based on this conversation, I don't know if this program's right for you. And they'll say, well, what do you mean? I go, everything you have told me has told me that there's a 99% chance you're going to fail already. And she goes, well, why do you say that? I'm like, because you just gave me a list of 10 things that you're not going to do. Most people, not most people, but the people who usually achieve what they want go, Chris, tell me what to do. I'll do exactly what you tell me to do. I love the lifestyle. I love training. I just need to be redirected to make sure I'm not spinning my wheels. That person is most likely to succeed. Person who goes, I only have 2 days a week to weight train. I want to lose 45 pounds. I want to make sure I can go out on Thursday and Friday night and drink with my friends. And I want to be able to go to social events. And I do this and I do that and I won't do that. I'm like, well, I mean, I'm not a magician, you know? But really the other aspect is I try to get people away from the reward system. People think that, well, I've been really good at my diet for 3 days. I cut out this, I cut out that, and I walked, and I only lost a half a pound. I'm like, if you are motivated by a reward, you're going to fail. You will lose the weight, and then you'll gain it back, just like everybody in America does, because it shouldn't be based on a reward system. It should be based on a lifestyle change. You're increasing quality of life. You're decreasing your risk of mortality, morbidity rate. You're reducing your risk of inflammatory diseases. You're learning how to eat healthy, change your habits. And if you love the process of eating healthy, feeling good, and exercise, you will achieve your goal.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead.
It's kind of like, you know, I tell them, when you go to your boss every week and you do a good job, do you get mad every time your paycheck doesn't have an increase? And she, I'm like, well, yeah, because you go to work every day, you shower every day, you take care of your kids. Nobody gives you a reward for that, do they? No, you just do it. So like, if you think there's a reward system that's going to motivate you to keep you going, you're going to fail, because what happens when you reach your goal of weight loss and it's time to maintain? What's the incentive to stay on plan? Now you don't see the scale drop. Now you're going to be in lingo. It's kind of somebody being like, hey man, here's your base pay for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you love what you do and you have to enjoy the process, not be so reward oriented. That's like, people want reward for their effort. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's like instant gratification. They just want to like get like, and that's the thing. I read this thing the other day, which is, you know, it makes perfect sense. A lot of people want to sacrifice their long-term goals just to get short-term fulfillment. It's just essentially to get to that point and say, literally I had a conversation with this client the other day. It's like, you know, you're trying to get to this, like this really fast pace goal, like not doing the things that we're supposed to do, but then for what? Just so you can get, you know, like 1 weekend or like 1 month of like, oh, I achieved my goal because you did this like crash diet, or like you did this big, you know, super fast thing. For what? So you can rebound and then going back to that cycle again. Just, you know, is it worth to get that instant gratification for a month now for you to suffer another 11 months of the year so you can go back into the cycle to try to like, you know, get back into it? You know, is it worth it? And so literally goes back into what you're saying about the reward system, because that's exactly how people live here in not only the US, all around the world. And food is like an emotional thing, and people look at it as that. You know, they had a great week, 6 days, let's have a cheat meal. You know, and that just kind of like, yeah. And that just kind of like goes into that. So, but speaking of that, because like now switching more into like the fat loss aspect of things, like there's a lot of people that come to you, and I know in some of the videos I've seen from you, you talked a lot about metabolism, and there's like a lot of like, you know, phrases being thrown around as like such as like a broken metabolism, and you know, your metabolism sucks, and all these kinds of things like that. So what is the truth behind all that? You know, as far as like people that have been dieted in chronic deficits for the longest amount of time, whether they're prep clients or just people that are, you know, they're just afraid to eat because they're afraid they're going to gain weight, but they're not seeing the progress. What's like your take on all of this?
All right. So it's impossible to break a metabolism permanently. It doesn't happen. What happens is, particularly more happens with women, is women are afraid to gain weight. So they might crash diet, yo-yo diet for a period of time, lose weight. Then they binge, they gain weight, and then they're afraid to eat, and they won't eat more because they don't want to gain. So they stay in that low caloric deficit, which makes the body's leptin drop, ghrelin increase, T4 converts to reverse T3, metabolism slows, but body becomes more efficient at storing fat, less efficient at gaining, less efficient at losing fat, and more efficient at gaining fat. And like people who have trouble knowing that they have to gain a little bit of body fat back to be able to lose more. Like you might need to gain 5 pounds back to lose 15. You have to bring that, you know, I call it the body's thermostat. You have to bring that body's thermostat back to homeostasis, or it's not going to work. Just like in bodybuilding, if I do 4 shows back to back, my effort put forth to stay lean or get leaner is greater and greater and greater. I have to do more cardio. I have to play with my carbs more. I have to go lower in calories sometimes to achieve the same result, because at that point, your body starts to say, whoa, the amount of money I'm spending and the amount of money that's coming in doesn't match. So the body does whatever it can to try to survive and maintain itself. People don't understand that it's not as simple as calories in, calories out, calories expenditure. I can do the math, lose 2 pounds per week for the next 52 weeks and be 50 pounds and die. No, your body has many checkpoints and balances that stops that. So like traditionally in bodybuilding and people who get insanely low body fat for those competitions, like we do a lot of refeeds. We do things that help bring down all those catabolic hormones, bring down cortisol, give the body a diet break, massive, you know, anywhere from 300 to 800 carb refeeds, taking breaks with exercise and then cutting carbs again to try to trick the body into giving up more fat. But just reducing calories from 3,000 to 25 to 2 to 15 to 1,000 and then steadily increasing calories over 12 weeks does not work for most people. People with good metabolisms genetically, as in like, I would say inefficient metabolisms because their body doesn't seem to adapt, will just eventually lose weight, or they'll lose weight and muscle mass at the same time. But I see it happen all the time with chronic dieters. They become very resistant to weight loss, and then they send me their diet and they're like 1,200 calories a day with an hour cardio a day, and they're not losing any weight. And like for a female who's 5'6", 25 years old, that shouldn't be. And then when you tell them they have to cut back cardio and add food, they freak. And probably I would say only 80% of people in that state of mind are actually able to listen, trust the process, and actually achieve their goal. Those same people have to struggle for years and years and years and years with their weight and so forth. But, you know, people refer to metabolic damage. People refer to broken metabolisms. It's just basically metabolic adaptation. Your body tries to counteract chronically low calories for a period of time to try to maintain itself, because it sees itself as like, wow, it's like we're driving down the street and we're on empty. We're like, oh my God, I got to find a gas station. So what do? You ease up on the pedal. Don't accelerate hard. Let's increase my miles per gallon. Let's be more gas efficient. It's exactly what your body does.
Yeah, that's huge, man. I was just having a conversation yesterday with one of my clients who she did keto for like, I don't know, like 4, 5, 6 months or something like that, plateaued. And it was like, you know, let's transition you off. Let's just bring the carbs up. You know, she's a CrossFitter, you know, it's like, you know, like let's just bring those carbs up. She freaked out, and she's like now like consuming like 250 grams of carbs daily, and she's like dropping weight. She's like, she's older. So it's one of those things that you're like, you know, it brings them those like aha moments, but then only if they trust you enough to see the process through and understand this is, we're going to have to reverse you up. We need to have to bring things up, and then all the different things that a lot of people are just not patient enough to see it. So those are big things that I feel like a lot of people struggle with, from that. And
it's a huge emotional component, when you tell them like they may have to gain a few pounds, they're like, what? And I'm like, listen, it's kind of like you take out a loan to go to college to get a job, and then you get a good paying job, then you pay the loan, and then you're making money. It's like, you can't just be like, I'm going to graduate high school, make tons of money, get the dream job, and not ever be kind of like giving up something. Like, you have to understand that it's a strategy. It's not mode. I hate that. You have to be strategic, and you have to understand what's going on. And you're right. It's a very difficult psychological barrier to break with many people.
Yeah. That's a big part of it. Now, one question I wanted to ask you, because I feel like different people start at different stages in their nutrition journeys, especially when they come to you. And this is something that I have learned throughout the years, because when I became a dietitian first, I did things a lot different than what I do now. How did you separate them? Because I know you do, just like me, we do macro-based coaching and nutrition. But when did you, for example, how do you separate the clients that are like newbies, like they have no clue what even a carbohydrate is, and how do you coach that person, comparatively speaking, to somebody that is more advanced? So let's say you have a competitive CrossFitter, like not necessarily bodybuilding, somebody that does more of an athlete type of person that knows and has a really good nutrition knowledge base, as far as taking it through the journey to achieve their goals, and how do you kind of separate the process for each individual one of them when you're creating these individual programs or plans for them?
All right. So I follow somewhat of a macro-based diet. I don't allow them to choose their own macros. I give them a diet preference chart that has a big food list of all the food categories, and they click what they want. And then I will use, initial base calories to find out where I think their macro should be. And once those macros are determined, I don't ever look at calories ever again. I just make the progression based on those macros per meal, which are all relatively even within a few grams. I do write the macros at the top of the page because everybody always wants to know what they're eating.
Yeah.
And below it is a very detailed outline plan of, say, 6 different meal options, which are all the same macro breakdown in the portions they follow. So I tell them, these are the portions you follow. You pick your meat in this portion, you pick your starch in this portion, pick your fat in this portion, that completes that meal. So even people who have no idea what a carb is can still be able to look at the plan and be like, I have to follow 100 grams of cooked chicken, I have to follow 105 grams of cooked jasmine white rice, I have to follow 10 mLs of olive oil, and I can add a vegetable. And that's their meal. Very rarely I get somebody who has zero knowledge. I had some people who had real zero knowledge. I was almost thrown back, but then I started to realize, some people don't have that type of experience today. But generally, do not run into that obstacle as much as one would think.
Okay, makes sense. And then do you usually kind of establish, for example, for as far as level of flexibility that you have for some of these clients, for example, and I'm guessing when some people say, for example, and this is, real life, again, this is more of a weight loss client, and they go through a year process with you, and they have events or vacations and things like that, because a lot of people ask me about this stuff, and it's what, Andre, it's I'm being consistent, I'm doing everything, but I'm going on this vacation, and for example, if I'm tracking macronutrients, or I'm doing all these different things, or trying to kind of visually estimate portions and stuff like this, I'm gonna freak out because I feel I'm going to completely fall off track, and I'm going to completely blow up my diet, and I'm going to undo all the progress that I've made. How do you deal with those kind of situations with clients that have situations like that life throws at them normally? Gotcha.
I deal with it a lot. Can you hold on just 1 second? I'm sorry, 1 second.
Yeah.
I do give my clients a cheat meal off per week. I do give them parameters. We'll start with that. I don't allow pizza. Just the environment of high fat, high carb just stays with people for days after they have it. And I mean, let's be honest, who's satisfied with 2 slices of pizza? Nobody.
Yeah, nobody.
So I usually have them do like burger and fries, steak dinner, sushi, breakfast food, etc. But when it comes to like social events, I tell them like, listen, man, like I really think that when you're on the plane, you're trying to reach a goal, you should really stick to that 1 day a week that we have scheduled for your cheat meal with your wife or your family, where you can kind of eat relatively what you want, unmeasured, and live some normacy. But if it's a social event, I really suggest you try to mimic the plan the best you can. So like when going to a restaurant, look at what they have available and see if you can mimic what's on your plan, and obviously use your best choices. Now, when it comes to vacations, I always tell them, like, how do I tackle this? I'm like, well, one, have a plan. Don't just wake up in the morning and then figure out what breakfast is going to be. Figure out when breakfast's open. Figure out what's available. Figure out what's around the area.
Plan and prepare.
Have a plan so that way you're not caught starving 5 hours out eating, and then you're like, I eat the first thing I saw, which was a bagel and cream cheese and orange juice. And then really hungry after. So I was like, man, all they had available at that time was like, you know, a cheese and steak. And then before you know it, it's going spiraling. But I always will tell them, like, you eat off plan and you know, eat whatever you want, or you go back to your habitual eating habits, you're going to gain weight. I get a lot of clients that will want me to say it's okay. It's never okay. If it's off schedule, it's just not. It's going to affect your results. And I always say, hey, it's your choice. Just don't be upset if the next 2 days, if your weight spikes a little bit, the weight will come right back down. It's just a little water retention, provided you didn't binge or lose control. It's not a big deal, but just know that that's the consequences. And most of the time they go, you know what, I'll stick to the plan. Because they want you to say, no, it's totally okay. You'll be fine. You'll still lose weight. And then they'll be like, well, you told me it was okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like telling them, like, you know, you have to be honest, you know, and say, you know, it's your choice. It's, you know, depending on what you know, how much. And I tell people that when they travel, it's like, you know, you decide how consistent you want to be in your nutrition program, but it's ultimately going to be up to you to well, first of all, make that decision, but understanding the consequences, whether you're super on top of it or not. And there are a lot of times, like you said, like there's like, no, I want to stick to this. I want to have my flexibility, but I was still going to make sure that I can kind of like accomplish these things. Now, one thing I know that you've talked about a lot in the past is it's going to be meal timing. And I wanted to know, because I know there's a lot of like different coaches, dietitians that kind of have mixed views on this. And I want to know yours on the importance of meal timing from the perspective of, you know, I know that, you know, there's a lot of, you know, there's a big movement on fasting, intermittent fasting, or essentially not necessarily having like the meals every 2 to 3 hours and so forth like that. What is your take on all this, and how do you kind of like advise your clients on meal timing from the perspective of, let's say, for example, like, you know, weight loss? Because I know it's different. For example, somebody trying to like gain muscle mass and they had to like get a ton of calories in from, you know, in that manner.
Okay. I don't believe in snacking at all. I think snacking promotes fat gain. I think snacking prevents good fat loss because people are constantly eating, which is constantly giving them baby spikes in insulin. They're not allowing fasting between meals. It creates that demand to stabilize blood sugar and burn fat. So that's one thing I explain to people. I'm like, we don't snack. If we have to snack, it could be a half ounce of nuts or, you know, an ounce of cheese, something fats and proteins, not snack on crackers or fruit. That's only going to leave you hungrier. It's going to inhibit your fat loss, increase appetite, possibly, etc. But I tell them 4 meals per day is minimum. Everybody I have eats 4 meals per day. There's a few people that don't, which I allow them to get away with, provided they're getting results. I just think 3 meals sometimes for people, it's too large a gap and they get really hungry. 4 meals makes them look forward to something sooner. I think stabilizing blood sugar, better glycemic control is best with 4 meals. And also I tell people sometimes the amount of meals you eat a day is really sometimes dependent on your caloric intake. If I have a man who's 6'5", 250 pounds, and he's a professional strongman, he's eating more than 4 meals.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Eat 2,000 calories in 1 meal?
Yeah.
Tired. So, and then the same aspect is you get some girl who might come to you who's 5 feet, who does CrossFit, wants to eat 6 meals a day. I'm like, well, man, if you're okay with eating like 2 egg whites, a teaspoon of peanut butter on a toast, like a tiny little meal is fine, but you're not going to be satisfied and it becomes too repetitive in that sense. So 4 meals per day is really the gold standard I really work with everybody on. And then after amount of time, based on their feedback, I might make the exception of 3 meals and then 2 fatty snacks, like they're very low carb, just fats and protein. And then sometimes I'll make the exception where, like, if they're a larger gentleman and they want 4 meals, but they don't have time, they do 4 meals. And eventually they're like, Chris, these meals are just too big. Can we break them into 5? Sure. I have a lot of firemen. I have a couple homicide detectives and people who work 24-hour shifts. And in that case, sometimes they might eat 7 times in that 24 hours.
You just control their portions a little bit differently.
Yeah. I'm like, if you're awake 5 hours after your last scheduled meal, you can't be not eating for the next 9 hours, So I'm like, you got to eat something else, or it's going to end very bad to the Wendy's drive-thru at midnight. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Prevent it from happening so you have something on hand just in case. And that usually works. But that's my take on it. And, the fasting thing, yeah, it could have its application with certain things and certain people. And I understand the research. I've reviewed it. It's great. But the question is it sustainable for life?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who stuck with it for a year.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I'm like, dude, don't be extreme. Adopt something that you like. Because I've had some people do fasting and correlation with food, because they would fast and they would binge like crazy. And then they feel ill and sick. And then I'm like, then this is not working for you.
Yeah. And I talk about this all the time because, I have talked a lot about intermittent fasting in the past, and I that's exactly what I explained. It's not for forever, and it's not for everybody, and they can create that relationship with foods if you don't really have a good one to start off with in the beginning. Because a lot of people come to me, it's like, oh, I want to do intermittent fasting. I heard this is a big thing to do. Like, all it do is it creates caloric restriction if your fat loss is the goal. But you can accomplish it many other different ways. Yep. It's not the only way to do it. And I feel like it really depends on what you can kind of adhere to. I think there's, like you said, there's a lot of applications that can be, for some people. But I feel like the biggest mistake a lot of people make is they kind of create this. It's kind of like a text. It's like rules, and they say, if I'm going to do fasting, I cannot eat in this kind of like hours and whatnot. And I'm like, I do sometimes. I go through periods of time because I like to have bigger meals, like where I want to make sure that I'm influxing a good amount of calories into my main meal. So I do fast, like sometimes in the morning. But then I'm not holding. If Saturday comes and I want to have a brunch with my fiance or something, like I'm not gonna like, oh no, I can't have anything until like 1 o'clock. So it's like people just create this kind of like very strict set of rules around some of this stuff that, a lot of times like creates that kind of bad relationship with food. Yes. and with the process that they're kind of on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. And I can't believe this whole keto kick's coming back around again. Keto again, it's not for everybody. Some people work well. When I travel, I actually follow keto, because if I'm for 6 days out of the country, it's so easy to find fats and proteins. It's very hard to find quality carbohydrates.
That's interesting. That's good to know.
It's like when I go out, I'm like, all right, rice, and it's like covered in butter and salt. And I'm like, I can easily have steak, and I can have some vegetables. I can have chicken. I can pack nuts. Obviously, I'll throw in pieces of fruit. Let me take that back. I follow low carb when I travel. I don't follow keto. I will, because I can easily find an orange, an apple in any country. I know that's clean. I can find meats in any country. I can bring nuts with me, and it becomes very easy. Not to mention, when I follow very low carb when I travel, I don't get jet lag at all. I get zero jet lag.
That's really interesting.
I try to combat the issues with digestion and constipation and jet lag through nutrition when I travel, and I do have my clients do the same. And they're like, Chris, I got back last night. I'm only 1 pound up, and I didn't have any constipation issues, and I wasn't tired at all for work today.
And I ate all the fat I wanted. Well, you control it, but I got a lot more fat this time.
Yeah, that's and the good. Thing is this, they're not hungry. They're like, 30 grams of fat per meal, 5 times a day. Like, I'm not hungry at all. I almost missed a meal. I'm like, that's great to have that problem, instead of being at the airport being like, oh, maybe I'll get a burrito, maybe some chips. And before you know it, they're like, stomach's distended, gassy, they don't feel good, they're groggy.
Yeah, man, that happens often. That's a pretty interesting strategy. That's good to know. That's definitely something that like is gonna have me think about. I have some travel coming up, so maybe that's a strategy that I'm gonna try to implement for like in my next travel dates.
You know what's funny is I found that out by accident. I was actually in prep and I had to travel for 4 days, and the flight was like 12 hours. And it was actually my low carb day, so it was like 50 carbs a day. And I'm like, I get off the plane, I'm like, I feel great. Digestion was fine. I'm like, huh. Oh, well.
I guess I discovered something new.
Yeah. And then the next time I travel, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to cut my carbs way back, increase my fat, see if it happens again. Sure enough, felt great. But I'm like, you know what? That's what I'm going to do now.
That's awesome, man. That's just good things that you kind of discover on, self-experimentation. So.
Oh, absolutely. I love doing that. I'm a weirdo. I do a lot with blood work. I will try to change my nutrition drastically and check my blood work in 2 weeks to see if I can alter my lipids. And it's like I just pay out of pocket. It's like $50. I can get my lipids checked, and then I'll check it again, and then change the diet, put red meat back in the diet twice a day, and then check my lipids again to see if there is effect. And it's interesting to some of the things that you find.
Really? Oh, we're gonna have to have an entire podcast on some of like the self-experimentation things that you've done and you discovered.
This is really crazy.
Oh, dude, you just gave me enough content to be able to kind of bring you back on here and kind of talk about that, man.
I'll give you this content and we'll save the rest for later. So like Christmas, obviously I eat whatever I want Christmas. So I was at my wife's, family's house, and I had a huge meal. I had cookies, appetizers, stuffed mushrooms, ate way too much food. Just like typical holidays, eat too much food, sit on the couch, fall asleep. I'm like, I'm going to get my blood work done tomorrow. Liver enzymes elevated, cholesterol, LDL elevated, triglycerides, not elevated as in like above what they're supposed to be, but elevated for me. Blood glucose was 137. It's like I gave myself acute fatty liver in one humongous meal. Because fat you ate, and obviously it's only been 15 hours since that meal. So that large quantity of calories and sugar, you can see how detrimental it actually was to the body in acute phase. And it's like, I exercise, I'm muscular. My blood sugars are always flawless. Everything's always great. And I easily altered it in one large meal.
That's crazy. But then it usually normalizes. It's just basically the acute effect that one bad meal could have in your metabolism, basically.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially sugar. You combine a bunch of sugar with saturated fat, like an absurd amount for somebody, you definitely give them acute fatty liver in a short period of time.
That's crazy.
It's all stressed out.
Now, I want to be respectful of your time, so I have one more question before we jump into like the rapid fire section, which is just a quick things I want just fast answers to. But the last question would be like, what's like, I'm not gonna say like your go-to supplements. I want to take like basically when is like the moment where you add supplements into the mix, because I'm getting the feeling that you're nutrition first all the time. Is there a time for your clients when there's supplements that can help provide an edge, depending whether an athlete or a weight loss client or so, that that you feel like, and this can be an extensive conversation, but just kind of like your general take on supplementation when that's needed.
Yep. When I say an edge, I'm going to say I almost never tell people to give them an edge. Mm-hmm. Let's say this is going to remedy any possible deficiency in your current nutrition plan. Most everybody I put on vitamin D. If they're not,
I'm deficient. Just found out last week.
Yeah, my wife was. This is really funny. So my dad's a physician. I'm like, Dad, you think I and Lexi should get their vitamin D checked? He goes, at your age? He goes, no way. I'm like, Dad, we're practically vampires. We never leave the house. He goes, if you're in your 40s, female, risk factors, he goes, I would say, sure. Sure enough, I was right on the cusp of being low, and my wife was super low. And she supplements with vitamin D. I
live in Florida. I go out and I was like in the low 30s, and it's not, it depends on the standards that you follow. But for me, that's, I want to make sure that my levels go higher. And I was like surprised, like I'm Latino. I live in Florida. I go out to the sun very often, and I'm like, see, so that's some of the things, like it was really interesting for some people. Like when I posted about it on my Instagram, they're like, holy crap. I mean, this, you would not expect that.
Yeah, and you need it for everything. But all right, so back to supplements. The other supplements I have people use is zinc, magnesium, and calcium. Mm-hmm. More specifically, magnesium.
Yep.
find it a lot of people who exercise and eat nutrition, on a stricter plan, like they get muscle cramps. They don't feel very good, but I always give them magnesium. Now, I don't give them the full dose that says in the supplement bottle, which is like 400 milligrams a day. I usually tell them it's 200 milligrams a day is fine. And if they have more issues with muscle cramps, I might go to 400. Then I usually do a fish oil.
Okay. Yep.
And that's really kind of like, but I always tell people, like, do I have to take the supplements? I'm like, you have to take vitamin D. The rest you can get rid of.
Yep. Dude, everybody has right in line with me, man.
Yeah. And then everybody has like a protein shake. And it's not like I'm sitting there being like, all right, you have to drink protein shakes. I always say real food's always better. But as you know, nobody has time for anything. So I'm like, all right, man, this is what you could do. You could take 2 scoop of whey isolate. You could blend it with quick oats, frozen banana, frozen fruit, and add a little spinach. And that can be a quick smoothie in the morning.
Yeah.
I usually have some sort of protein supplementation for convenience for them to get a meal in, or else they won't do it.
That's awesome, dude. Like literally, like just like it's exactly what I say to most of my clients. So I love to hear that. Cool, man. So we're coming to the end of the show, and I wanted to ask you some rapid fire questions. These are just like fun things, like just to finish it up. So it'll be just 4, and I'm just I'll literally just shoot, and then you answer the first thing that comes to your mind. Sound good?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. First one: favorite exercise. Go.
I love training legs. I love squatting, even though I really can't squat anymore because I destroyed my knee, but I love training legs.
Okay, good. Second thing, I'm not sure if you read, but if there's a book that you would like to give somebody or you would like to recommend to everybody to read, let's say as a Christmas gift, what would you give them?
I would say actually there's a couple books by Jocko, a couple of Navy SEALs.
Jocko what's his name? I think I know what you're talking about.
Willenick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. About mindset and accomplishing your goals and accomplishing fears. And there's one other one. I think Irving, was it Steve Irving? Not Steve Irving. It's a Navy SEAL book. If you wait a second, I can go get it.
Yeah,
hold on. Big book, easy to read. Jocko Willink, Discipline Equals Freedom. It's the field manual.
Mm-hmm.
Super easy to read, and they have different things about mindset. And like I always tell people, like, listen, there's physical differences between people. Yes, there are mental differences. I do believe there's more mental capability of changing than physical. You can't change your height, can't change how high you can jump, but you can change your outlook. You can change your mental toughness. You can learn to not react to certain things like others do. Hence why some people can go through the same thing as others and smile, while other person has everything is miserable. It's an outlook.
It's perception and then your attitude towards your actions. Yep.
And the stuff in this book is like dead on. And like, I respect the special forces guys and what they do more than anything. And I'm like, if those guys can do what they do, I can live my life in an air conditioned house, food down the street, gym, and not complain and be unhappy. You know what I mean? So that's a great book.
That's great, man. Love that. Thank you for the recommendation. And make sure to I'll add it to the show notes. Not sure if you listen to YouTube channels like videos or podcasts, but is there one that you could recommend or that you just kind of like would point people towards to that you feel like is valuable as far as nutrition content, training, or whatever?
Nutrition, not as much. Just because, as you know, like it's not that I don't listen to other RDs or other people. It's like a lot of nutrition is formed opinion.
Yeah.
I like to hear opinions and learn different tactics, but like I find more useful when I learn the basics of nutrition and apply what I've learned and then watch to see what happens as the effect. So I'm paying attention more intuitively to how I'm reacting, how my clients are reacting.
Yeah.
And at them instead of looking at new tools. That's been the most helpful. But I listen to Revive.
Okay.
Natural bodybuilder, and they have a lot of PhD strength coaches on there.
Mm-hmm.
Field, and I listen to a lot of hypertrophy and strength training, powerlifting, and that kind of stuff. Learning the current research behind like failure training, non-failure training, high volume, low volume, multiple, that kind of stuff.
Good. Okay. That's good to know. Revive is a good podcast. I definitely recommended it in the past. The last question would be the most fun one and the most like the craziest answer I always get. If you were stranded in a desertic island for the rest of your life and you could pick one food to have for the rest of it, what would that be?
If I had to choose one food as an only one food
for the rest of your life,
because of nutrition content or because I like it?
You choose that. It's up to you.
Oh man, I'd probably say salmon.
Okay, there you go. You could probably catch. You could probably catch it too in there.
Yeah, I would say salmon. I would say the omega-3s. I love salmon. I probably wouldn't get sick of eating it. Try it out. I could cook it different ways. I would say salmon.
Okay, that's a good one. First one time I get that. Thank you. Appreciate that, brother. Well, thank you so much, man. Like, how can people, like, before we wrap it up, how can people find you? How can people contact you, reach out to you and get in touch with you, whether it's for coaching or just to find out more about what you do and how you help people?
They can contact me through my website, totalnutrition.com. And people email me through there. I will say, like, a lot of emails aren't perfect. So if you send me an email and you don't hear back from me within 8 hours, I did not get your email. And then you need to send me an email direct and not through the website, which is on my website.
Okay.
Because sometimes, whatever reason, like AOL kind of bounces back off of Gmail sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Get the emails and I will respond to the person like 5 times, but they don't get it back.
Yep.
Technology's not perfect.
So best way would be through your email or direct email. Just make sure they reach it up. All right.
Or you can go through my IG page, Total Nutrition, on Instagram and message us through there.
Awesome. Perfect, dude. Like, well, now people know how to find you. Thank you so much for your time here today. And we know it's valuable and for dropping a ton of knowledge bombs here today, man. So
yeah, man, I really appreciate it. It's great. Good time.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Viva Nutrition Radio. Couple of things before you take off. If you enjoyed this episode, please, I would love to get your feedback. So feel free to drop down a review and I will be forever grateful. Also, if you like this podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We have it on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play. And lastly, if you would like to receive a freebie from me, make sure you sign up for our newsletter at www.vive-nutrition.com. See you guys in the next episode. Ciao, ciao.